The chains sounded like whispers over stone. Xiao stopped on the threshold, 1 foot inside the ruined temple, 1 foot out in the cypress wind, cold pressed at his cheeks. Not night cold, not the innocent chill of air flowing down a hill, but the kind that came from rooms left closed too long. 3 candles lit themselves in a row along the shattered altar, each wick finding fire, as if a careful hand had just passed by. Their light trembled and steadied, laying thin gold on dust and broken wood. She stood beneath the hole in the roof, where the moon poured through like water. Her robe was paper white, her hair black as moonlit water deepen overnight, and her bare feet, were they quite touching the floor, seemed to hover a feather width above the stone. Her face startled him, not for beauty alone, though it had that, but because it seemed made for gentleness, for listening. "You shouldn't be here," she said. The voice carried across the empty hall without effort. It didn't echo. It seemed to arrive already inside his chest. "Please go before they find you." Somewhere deeper, chains whispered again, dragging through old dust. He heard a dry breath taken in a place that had forgotten how. He nearly stepped back, and then, with nothing but hunger and stubbornness to his name, he stepped forward instead.
My grandmother used to say, "Not all ghost stories are meant to scare you. Some are warnings in disguise, and some are love letters that never found their address." She told me this one when I was too old to be frightened and too young to think I'd ever be haunted. It starts like many stories do with a journey. A scholar traveling alone, a ruined temple, and a girl with a voice like water poured in silence. Gran called it the tale of Xiao Qian. Not a foolish boy, not a damsel in need, but a meeting between love and death, and the strange kindness that sometimes binds them.
Days earlier, the world had been ordinary. The road, stretched like a frayed ribbon between muddy fields, thaw and rot heavy in the air. Crows gossiped on bare branches, while his pack felt lighter each time he checked it. Ning was traveling for the provincial exams, again. His mother's last blessing rested in his sleeve, folded soft. He carried 2 shirts, a book of odes, the corners stained with grease, a bottle of ink that always threatened to leak when the path grew rough, and a bamboo tube of coins, clicking like teeth each time he walked. By late afternoon, the sky colored like old bruises. A stand of cypress trees hunched on a hill. Under them, a temple crouched, its eaves broken like shoulders, its door yawning. The place smelled of wet stone and an old fire. Shelter, though? You didn't argue with a roof when the wind came down the valley, like a dog that hadn't been fed. Inside, he found a sweep of floor surprisingly clean of leaves. Somebody came and went. A straw pallet lay in the corner. Someone had chalked a talisman on the lintel long ago. Rain had blurred it into a tired smile. At the very front lay a small offering of withered chrysanthemums in a chipped cup. Beside it, a new broom. And a girl sweeping. She moved, like someone trying not to wake a sleeper in the next room, careful, quiet, precise. When Ning stepped in, she paused, then looked up. The lamp was so low that her face seemed drawn with 2 soft strokes, eyes, mouth, and the rest decided by shadow. "You can sleep by the east wall," she said. "The tiles above it don't complain as much." "I have no coin," he said, because he was the sort who apologized to rooms as well as people. "I can fix a hinge. Or copy a sutra, if you have one. I'm not a monk," she said. She glanced, a flicker of thought, toward the inner hall, where old statues stood in pieces. "I'm here." "Just here?" he asked. "For now." She set the broom aside, even that neatly, and poured water into a cup scarred with hairline cracks. When he drank, the water tasted like its own deepness, like the cold of a spring that had never bothered with the surface. "I'm Ning," he said. He hadn't meant to offer his name, but it came easily out of his mouth and felt correct, hanging in the air. "Xiao Qian," she said, weighing his name, then setting hers beside it, like two stones on a ledge. He lay on straw that night, listening to the temple's breathing. The tick of cooling timber, the faint leak whisper of wind through tiles. Somewhere, water gathered and dropped in rhythm into a basin. Tap, tap, tap. He meant to sleep. Instead, he timed his breath to the slow sweep of the broom and told himself not to listen for the pause when the girl rested her wrists and shook out her tired fingers. He woke at dawn to the smell of wet earth and lamp smoke. Sunlight came in crooked bars through the broken roof, lighting the dust, so it seemed each mote had remembered how to dance. Xiao Qian swept through the light, as if it had not been set out for her. She sang under her breath as she worked, a tune without words, low and persistent, like remembering. In daylight, he saw her better. Not merely beautiful, which was dangerous enough, but composed. Not simply pale, but the pale of porcelain and pearl flesh, and not the pallor of fevers. She moved, as if someone had taught her how to carry a tray through a crowded room and leave a wake of quiet behind. When she poured him water a second time, he noticed her hands. Small, clean. The knuckles, a little more pronounced than most girls usually were. At market, the porridge seller frowned when Ning mentioned the temple. "Better to sleep under a wagon," the man said, ladling thick rice into a bowl, "than under those broken eaves." "It kept most of the wind out," Ning said. "There's a girl sweeping. She's—" He realized he didn't know the right word. "Polite." The seller's ladle paused in midair. "We don't send our girls up there," he said. "Nor your boys," Ning asked lightly, trying for a joke. "We keep the village doors shut," the man said simply. He pushed the bowl across. "Eat somewhere else tonight." Ning ate under the cypress. He told himself he would go on, that it was foolish to linger. He read a page of the Odes and did not understand it well enough to pretend. He thought about the exam, about what kind of man he'd be if he passed. He picked a name for what the air smelled like. Moss, ash, a memory of incense. He thought about Xiao Qian's voice, and how small it had been in that wide room, and how it still filled it. He returned to the temple, as twilight puddled in the hollows of the hill. "I brought rent," he said, producing 2 buns folded in paper. "Unless you take coins, in which case I have rent and an apology." She looked at the buns, as if they were something remembered from a long way away. "You pay rent to rooms?" she asked. "I pay rent to silence," he said. "It holds my thoughts for me, without telling me they are foolish." Her mouth tucked at one corner, almost a smile. She set the buns on the altar gently, as if returning them to a story, and lit the lamp. That night, after he lay down, he heard the small definite click of chopsticks against porcelain. The roof leaked when it rained, but only in places. "The east wall," she had told him. He shifted toward it, as a map of dark fell slowly across the ceiling. "This corner keeps secrets," he said. "That's what corners are for," she said, settling beside him, knees drawn up under her robe. Their shoulders touched. Her sleeve brushed his wrist. He almost pulled away because her skin was cold, not the cold of someone who has been outside and will warm again, but the cold of stone that forgot it had ever been warmed. He didn't pull away. "What do you study?" she asked. "How to make officials like me," he said. "How to make words like each other." "Do you write beautifully?" she asked. "I write anxiously," he said. "It is a style." "Show me," she said. He unpacked brush and water, flattened paper on his knee. His hand wanted to shake, which annoyed his pride. He wrote the first line of an ode. He had loved as a student, and learned as a man. And the characters came out exactly fine, exactly obedient, exactly without music. "You write like a man trying not to fall off a roof," she said. "And how," he asked, "should a man write?" "Like he is writing a letter he hopes will be kept," she said, "like he believes the person on the other end will reread it when they are tired." He looked at his own hand, surprised by tenderness. "And you?" he asked. "Do you write?" "Only names," she said, and named 2 families from the village below, and drew their gate sigils in the dust between them. "I'll forget if I don't." "Who taught you?" he asked. "A woman," Xiao Qian said slowly, as if the word had to be coaxed out. "She forgot many things. She taught me the ones she could hold on to." Ning offered one of the buns, and watched her not take it. When he looked away, he heard again. Later, the soft discipline of chopsticks. He noticed more wrongnesses as comfort grew. Her shadow didn't always keep up with her. Once, passing a lamp, he saw it pause, and then hurry, as if it had tripped. The dog belonging to the poultry farmer's boy stopped barking if she came near, and lay on its belly like a penitent. The mirror on the altar didn't fog when she stood in front of it, though his breath ghosted it quickly. She moved through sunlight, as if sunlight were a kind of water. She had forgotten how to drink. When she sat, he could smell her. Not a perfume, not anything sold in paper cones at booths, but pear blossoms after frost. Sweetness with a little death in it. Her laughter, when he earned it with a rare good joke. Light in the temple, as if someone had opened a second door. Once, she touched his sleeve to straighten it. He looked down at her hand against his robe and understood, without the need of any proverb, that a person could spend a long winter living on moments and remain half full. He dreamed of her the 3rd night, but not like a man with a fever. In the dream they sat at the threshold watching, the valley fill up with mist, as if the sky had resigned and come down to ground. She told him an old story, about a boy who had stolen a peach, and a girl who had forgiven him before he said he was sorry. He tried to tell her a newer story, about a man who had passed a difficult exam, and used his good stamp for small mercies. She interrupted to correct the parts that weren't true yet. "This would be easier," he said in the dream, "if you were alive." She smiled in the dream and woke him by saying, "This would be easier if you were wise." The village wouldn't give back its fear. The porridge seller drew a knife on the table with his finger. "No one who sleeps up there a week. Peacefully after," he said. "Temple takes things. Things you need." "Like what?" Ning asked, as if he could agree not to own any. "Faith?" the man said distantly. "Names. Sometimes. Hearts." He shook his head, embarrassed, as if the last word had been too big for his mouth. On the 4th afternoon, Ning found a Taoist asleep by a low wall, where the lane met a little field of potatoes. He knew he was a Taoist, because his shoes had given up and his hat had not, and because a pack lay under his head that clicked like a drawer of old spoons. He was the sort of man you step over, unless you're the sort of man who stops. "Do you take commissions?" Ning asked. "I take naps," the Taoist said through the hat. "I receive gifts. I accept gratitude after the problem is solved. What if the problem is complicated? What if the bun is fresh?" the Taoist asked, smiling under the hat. Ning, who was not a fool, brought him a bun. The man ate half in 3 bites and saved half neatly, with the air of someone who had at least once been loved. "I'm staying in the hill temple," Ning said. The Taoist moved the hat. Fast. Ordinary eyes looked at him. "Don't." "There's a girl there," Ning said, surprising himself by speaking at all. "There would be," the Taoist said, and put his hat back. "Then don't twice." That night, the temple seemed to tighten around itself. Wind went quiet in the cypress. The small basin in the corner stopped tapping. Candle flames flattened. The smell in the room deepened. Old wax, wet stone, dust that had never bothered anyone until now. Ning woke to Xiao Qian's voice. "No more," she was saying. "Not this one." The answer came from the inner hall, where the grand statues had lost their heads long ago. Someone had gathered the fallen faces and leaned them neatly against a wall. The voice was dry as winter reeds. It sounded like a room remembering words. It had been forced to learn. "This one's heart is clean," it said. "Bring it." Xiao Qian's reply was breath, not sound. "Please." Something hot and fine, as hair flared around her ankles, lines of flame that left no smoke. She gasped and went still. Chains, Ning thought. Chains a ghost would feel. He stepped forward into light. He knew better than to be in. Her head jerked toward him. He read 100 things in that glance. Leave. Live. Forgive me. Don't give them the satisfaction of making sense of you. He ran. Down the hill, tripping in the root shadows. He ran to the field where the Taoist slept. The man was already sitting up with his hat on his head, pack open, as if he had been called with a string and a bell. "Good," the Taoist said. "I like being right, before I have to be useful." "Something is up there," Ning said, choking on the sentence. "With her." "Something is always with someone," the Taoist said, standing. "It's the distribution that varies." "You said don't," Ning said fiercely. "I did," the Taoist answered. "But I don't get everything I want." He slung the pack. "Say her name once." Ning caught himself. He said it once. The air felt like it marked a chalk line. "Ready?" the Taoist asked. "No," Ning said. "Good," the Taoist said. "People who say yes to that question die narrowly." The temple was awake, not bright. The candles were flat and thin, but aware, like an animal that opens one eye at the smallest noise. Xiao Qian stood in the main hall, hair unbound, lamp at her shoulder. Her jaw set the way people set their mouths, when pain is being polite but insistent. The air smelled of metal left in rain, then brought inside. The hair on Ning's arms lifted, not from cold, but from attention. From the inner room, a shape gathered itself and came forward. It did not walk. Space simply decided to be less between there and here. It wore a suggestion of a woman's body, the way a scarecrow wears a suggestion of a farmer. Ribs like white lattice, a skin-stretched face, whose smile had sentences it didn't deserve. Hair roped with little bells made of teeth. When it turned, the bells chimed, in a language a child would understand, and refused to learn. "Leave," Xiao Qian said, not to Ning this time, but to the Taoist. "Take him." "Taking people is your boss's business," the Taoist said, setting a small black-backed mirror on the floor where the demon could see itself not at all. "I specialize in returns." The demon's voice came from here and there. "Leave me the boy," it said. "You can have the broom." "Tempting," the Taoist said, "but I hear the bristles wear quickly." The demon's hand changed as it reached, fingers unrolling into hooks. And if the Taoist hadn't stepped, Ning's heart would have been in a new obscene light already. The Taoist caught the demon's wrist in a grip small and final as a door latch. "No," he said, as if speaking to a child. It was not enough. The demon twisted and struck again, with its other hand, and found flesh. Cold tore across Ning's chest. A white explosion. Pain, astonishment, a sense of deficit. He saw Xiao Qian's mouth open on a sound he couldn't hear. He saw his own heart, red and shining, beating furiously in someone else's hand. Then the world burned down to a coal and went dark. He returned to himself like a man pulled up by the hair from deep water. The first thing he knew was weight. Something warm pressed hard under his breastbone. The second was cold. Xiao Qian's tears on his face were like winter water. The third was noise. The bells in the demon's hair shattered, one by one like seeds thrown in a pan. "Back," the Taoist said between his teeth. A line of red cord quivered tight around the demon's ankles. The mirror's surface had gone dark as a hole, pulling the light out of the air. It hummed, which was not a thing mirrors ordinarily do. "Where is it?" the Taoist snapped. "Here," Xiao Qian said, and held up a heart with both hands, as if offering rice to an altar. She had dived under the bed. Ning realized, into the place where dust kept all the unimportant things, and come up with what was not allowed to be unimportant. The Taoist took it and slapped it to Ning's chest. It fitted with obscene familiarity. "Breathe," he told Ning. Not loudly. Ning did, and a convoy of aches arrived with the breath. He would have liked a better bargain. "Keep doing that," the Taoist said. He spread ash on his fingers, scrawled a character across skin that was not a parchment, spat, and pressed both hands down. The pain ratcheted, tilted, let go a fraction. Ning's heart, his, went on, grudging as an ox and twice as steady. The room lurched as the demon's illusions flexed. The altar turned into a slab in a cold room, then into bone. Faces rose out of corners, familiar and less so, each wanting something different. Apology, recognition, a place to rest. "Don't let them touch you," the Taoist said mildly to Ning, as if advising him about pickpockets. "You will be not quite yourself afterward, and not in the fun way." Xiao Qian moved then. The chains at her ankles flared, hungry, and she simply decided otherwise. Ning felt it like a wind changing direction. She took the flames in her hands, as if gripping a rope, that burned inward rather than out, and pulled. The sound was like silk, ripped in a quiet room. The smell was like a lamp blowing out. The demon staggered the smallest amount. And in that hesitation, someone else might not have seen. Xiao Qian was already there, pushing. She didn't look strong. That wasn't the kind of strength being used. "I own both," the demon said, and Ning understood too well what it meant. Debt and desire, heart and hunger. Girl and boy, debt in one hand, breakfast in the other. "Not today," the Taoist said, and threw the mirror. It struck the demon's chest and stuck as if the glass had teeth of its own. The darkness pulled. The room screamed. Not with sound, but with the idea of listening to a scream. The bell shattered down the demon's ropes of hair, tinkling into silence. It tried 3 faces in a breath, a mother, an old friend, a girl Ning had once wanted so much. He thought he would die of it, and none of them held. It reached for Ning's love of a city, where the lamps never went out, and for his shame at wanting it, for his brief greediness in liking a face that smiled at him, the way Xiao Qian did once. And he let go of all of those futures, because a person who has just been lent back his own heartbeat will choose differently, while it is loud. "Look at me," Xiao Qian said, steady as a line of neat characters. He did. She smiled even though her wrists were shaking. "Come back to the small life," she said. "There is room for joy there." He grinned like a fool, because return is a kind of joy. The mirror took the demon, the way a pond takes a stone, and the rings did not show because they went downward instead of out. The Taoist hunched over it, as if sheltering a baby from rain. When the thing was gone, he wrapped the mirror quickly in red cloth, as if embarrassed by its appetite. Silence ran across the floor, tripping on splinters, and landed on its hands. The candles burned ordinary yellow again. The smell of iron left first, then the smell of old breath, then the smell of fear, which is something like vinegar on a bad day. Xiao Qian stood without chains. She looked thinner, as if the room had taxed her, for every second she had borrowed. Her hair fell forward and back. Her eyes found Ning's. "Will you—" he began, and stopped, because the word he wanted was live, and it was too heavy to move without help. "Thank you for speaking to me like a person," she said. And that sounded like the most important sentence in the room. "Walk with me," he said. And this time, he let foolishness be the brave thing it was. "If I were alive," she said very gently, "I would complain about your boots and tell you to buy better ones after you passed the exam. I would sit beside your mother and learn her soup. I would learn all the ways to fold a blanket, so it creases the way she likes. I would be late to supper sometimes, and you would pretend to be angry. And then remember, you can't keep it up. I'm ready to practice all of those, he said, because hope is a craftsman, even when it is uninvited. The Taoist cleared his throat to keep tears from settling in it. He tied 3 precise knots in the red cord around the mirror. Morning, he said, is when grief is least rude. Now we do salt and silk. We close doors. He looked at Xiao Qian. You bought him out with what you had. There's not much change, I'm afraid. She laughed. It surprised all 3 of them, a small clean sound. I'll take a little. The temple seemed to exhale then. The cypress outside loosened their dark shoulders and allowed the wind to thread them. The candles guttered and came back. The small basin found its drip again. Night went on with its job. This is where I stop, she said. Don't, Ning said, because too many good sentences had already finished for one evening. Make a life that would have held me, she said, and hold it well. She touched his wrist. He felt the cold of her touch for what it was, not absence of heat, but the trace of a door he couldn't open. He bowed in thanks for being let to the threshold. She stepped backward, not afraid. The air folded once, and she was gone, not in a story way, because in a story a scarf or a bell is left behind, but in the way that leaves only silence, and a knowledge of where a person would have stood, if the world had been kinder. Dawn came, grey first, then the little gold that forgives. The Taoist ate the half-bun he'd saved, and asked if there were more. Ning found one, and didn't realize he was crying, until the Taoist pretended not to notice. We need silk, the Taoist said, and salt, and a shelf higher than anyone can reach by standing on a stool, and pretending not to be short. This mirror and I don't wish to see each other again soon. Will she? Ning began, and stopped, because a second failure to finish a sentence in one morning seemed lazy. Sometimes the world keeps what it takes, the Taoist said. He stretched his back and groaned as if his bones were doors finally oiled. Sometimes it gives change. Small coins in the palm, you weren't holding out. If you hear sweeping at night, be polite. What's your name? Ning asked, because names are a way to make a thing hold still. I like buns, the Taoist said, and not dying of other people's stories. He shouldered the pack. That will do. They burned what needed burning in the courtyard, a strip of cloth that had remembered faces too well, 3 stamps of talisman paper, whose ink had learned the wrong names. The smoke crawled over the roof and away. The Taoist wrapped the mirror like a child, and tucked it high, high, in the rafters, with red cords the mice would not chew. Salt the thresholds, he said, and stop inviting trouble by being kind to every stray with beautiful manners. What if the stray is a person? Ning asked. Then you will find a way to know, the Taoist said. And if you don't, you will find out afterward.
Some ghosts linger out of hatred, others out of hope. Xiao Qian was never trying to hurt anyone. She just wanted to be remembered like a person, not a problem to solve. And maybe that's all any of us want, to be spoken to kindly, to be given a place to stay, and to be known by someone who listens. Thank you for listening to Moonlight Whispers, Tea with the Ghosts. If this story stayed with you, let it. Just remember what my gran always said. Don't leave your heart unattended, in rooms where old shadows sweep.